you reach our children the most effective way possible when they come back to us on Friday. Since the Building Stronger Brains program will provide training to districts to empower school leaders and teachers to address chronic childhood trauma, or what experts call adverse childhood experiences. The workshop will examine and integrate practices that support trauma-informed teaching and promote resilience of students and staff. And our two speakers will be Pat Connor and Janet Watkins, and I would like to welcome them now.
Okay, good morning. It's still morning, isn't it? It feels like afternoon. We hadn't had lunch yet. I want to introduce myself and my lovely co-trainer here, Janet. I'm Pat Connor. I'll give you my 50-cent title. I am the Executive Director for the Office of Safe and Supportive Schools for the Tennessee Department of Education. How about that? That's about 50 cents. I've been there for 4 years, and before I came to the state, I was in Sumner County, which is just right up the road, if any of you know where Gallatin and Hendersonville are. I was there in their school district for 27 years as the Director of Safe and Healthy Schools. And so this topic today is very near and dear to my heart. And Janet, I'm going to let you, and I stole her from Sumner, so that's what we do.
Thank you, Pat. I'm Janet Watkins, and I was a school counselor in Sumner County for 22 years before I came to the state. And before that, I taught first grade, and before that, I taught special education. So I have a heart for this work. I'm very compassionate about this work. I'm very passionate, about this work, and have a lot of compassion for these young people. Now my title is Director of Training for Tennessee Aware, and I know that you are very familiar with Tennessee Aware, and I see Katie and Caitlin are here today, and we're so thankful for their services. And we are excited about what Lawrence County is doing. And as Director of Training, I coordinate all the youth mental health first aid trainings across the state. And Jenny Golden, right here in the front row, is one of my rock star trainers as well. So I do that, and in addition to that, I may have met some of you previously because I also go to districts and talk to them about their emergency operations plan and what we need to do, and it's called Tennessee Schools Prepare, and that is crisis postvention. So we work on coming up with a plan on what to do after a crisis occurs, because we're really good at doing the before piece, but not so good at the after piece. And as you know, in Aware, we were a response. Our grant was a response to the Sandy Hook shootings. And so our president at the time said, now is the time we've got to do something about mental health. And this initiative that we're going to talk about today fits right into that whole mental health piece. So thank you for coming. And you guys are you have the heart for this. I know you do. And what I love about what you do is that children will talk to you, won't they? They'll tell you what's going on in their life. So as you listen to this, I want you to think about the power that you have over these young people in listening to them, because we're going to talk a lot about listening and relationships. So I'm going to turn it over to Pat. We're going to kind of tag team back and forth, and I'm going to let her start us off.
Okay, we are so happy to be here today. Now, I will just do a little disclaimer here. I am not Tara Brown. I don't have those rock star qualities of presentation that Tara does, but I can guarantee you our passion for what we do is just as strong as her passion, and I hope it comes across to you today. Because when I was in Sumner County, let me say this, you folks were the reason I got anything done, ever. I had the privilege of serving with some of the finest bus drivers, teaching assistants, school nutrition folks. Who else we have in the audience? Bus drivers, secretaries, bookkeepers. You guys run the school. As I said, how many of you are secretary? Let me just say this. I'm over school safety for the state. Every workshop I do, I say to administrators, the most important person in your building is your secretary. Because your secretary is the first person that folks meet when they go through that door. And she or he, I don't think we have any he's that are secretaries, and I've never met one, I'll put it that way. You set the tone for the building. You welcome, you screen, you do a little bit of everything. So you guys are super important. I'm in the dark. That's okay, I look better in the dark. I'm getting a little older. So we're happy to be here today, and this is why we wanted to come and we developed this Building Strong Brains training, because teachers and support staff said to us, we don't know how to meet adequately the non-academic needs of students. It's all that other side of the report card is what we call it. And how do we meet those needs of those students? So we're going to tell you some strategies today. Also, we have a huge push in this state. Our strategic plan is called All Means All. That means everybody, not just a few students get an education, but all students get an education, the whole child. So we're going to really focus on why we need to make sure kids are in school. And one of the strategies that I'm going to talk about, or I'm going to say it right now, for chronically out of school, you bus drivers are a key component of attendance in a school. And you go, how is that? You know what's going on. If you have a student that does not come, that's usually on your route regularly, doesn't show up for 2 or 3 days, tell somebody at that school what's going on that I haven't seen and wonder what's happening. Because I have one district in the state that is using their bus drivers to do that and help with their attendance. And I think it's extremely positive and helpful. The other thing is we want to look at our discipline. And Lawrence County is a rock star. Because you guys are doing restorative practices, and many of you, raise your hand if you sat through some restorative practice trainings with my friend Kim Dobbins-Beck here. So the districts, the schools in Lawrence County are moving toward reducing exclusionary discipline practices. And what does that mean? Suspensions and expulsions. Because we know if kids aren't in school, they can't learn. So that's our strategic plan that I've already mentioned. And this is what we like to start out with, because we have public education, right? And in public education, everything's equal. True? Is that true? Is it equal? No. What we do know now is equity. Some kids need more help than other kids. They need those supports. If you look at the little boy in the first one for equality, he can't even see over the fence. He's got some issues. So we're going to have to give him an extra couple of boxes so he can look over the fence and so he can see the ball game and so he can be a part. And we know some kids take more from us than we can give sometimes. But then there are those kids who are pretty self-sufficient. They don't really need a lot from us, and those kids help the other kids. So equity is important. It's justice. And that's what education, I'm proud to say, is moving towards across the nation. So today, bear with us, because you know there is some reason behind all of this, because you got to understand what this is for. You know, a brain, you know, when we used to say a fat head, you know, that's the biggest collection of fat cells in your body is your head. So that's why people say you're a fat head. But we've got to understand the workings behind that. What's going on? What's happening? How do things affect us? And especially starting out at very young ages. So the next time you see someone come in the office, the next time you see someone come through the cafeteria line, the next time you see someone come on your bus and they're acting like a fool, there's a reason for their acting like a fool sometimes. and we need to get it to the bottom of that. So that's what we're going to do today, is look at that. And I'm going to turn it over to my lovely assistant. Oh, you do, don't you?
She's passing the torch. So here's what we know about development. We know that brain architecture is established very early in life. That's nothing new. We've always known that. And we know that stable, caring relationships, and we're going to talk a little bit about serve and return, that shapes that brain architecture of what and we're going to get into that in a moment. We also know we're going to talk quite a bit about toxic stress. Now, let that sink for a second. Toxic stress, those words. Wow. Toxic stress in the early years of life can really derail that healthy development. And so this new research that we found, what we do know about toxic stress is it changes the brain architecture. And we're going to get into that a little bit in just a few minutes. But the good news is we know that we can have resilience. And resilience can be built through this serve and return. And resilience is really just that whole bouncing back. How many of you have had bad things happen to you in your life? Were you able to get through it? One of the reasons you were able to get through that is because you had a stable, caring relationship with somebody that was there for you all the time. And that's what we know about toxic stress and brain architecture. So I'm going to start off with a video called Brain Builders that's just going to talk a little bit about how the brain is built. And my tech person may have to do this, I think. Can you start it for me? It should just start. We can dance. These videos are embedded. They're supposed to just start. Okay. Yeah, they worked fine at the other place. No, that goes forward. Technology, does it drive you crazy? It can be your best friend or your worst enemy. Most definitely. Kim is our techie at our office. She's really the one that gets things going, so we're going to let her do that. Ah, we're not connected, apparently. Our technical guy. Are you my technical fella? Not really. He's standing in for the technical guy. They shouldn't need the internet. They should just start. Yes, thank you so much for your patience. It shouldn't even need to be connected. Everybody stand up. Stand up and stretch. All right, let's do our exercises. You want to do your head, shoulders, knees, and toes, Pat? It's on the screen, but it's not.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, we're going to do a brain break. You know what a brain break is? You're supposed to have your blood supposed to go up here to your brain, and that's what makes you alert. So while we're waiting for this, I'm going to do a quick, and you can do this with anybody. I do it with myself because I can't do it, so I'm just giving you that. So have you ever heard the story or the song Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes? Okay, you got that? So would you mind please standing up? And we're going to play that game. And you get to hear me sing, and that is really awesome. So when I say head, shoulders, knees, and toes, we're going to do the opposite. That's why this is one of those you've got to stimulate that brain. So when I say head, you say shoulders. When I say shoulders, you do your head. When I say knees, you touch your toes. When I say toes, you touch your knees. Okay, so let's practice that. Head, shoulders, knees, toes. Head, shoulders, knees, toes. You got it? Okay, now the best part, you get to hear me sing. So are you ready? And then it's going to get a little faster. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes. Okay, now we're faster. Ready? Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Head, shoulders, knees and toes. Yeehaw! Okay, that got your brain going. Okay, I think we've got the video. Yeah, it worked before.
Yeah, this is not our computer, so we're not very familiar with why this one. So he said for you to hold your ears and nose correctly, and maybe it'll work. Aha! He wasn't kidding. No sound. He's got it muted. We'll get there. Kim, we're going to have to go backwards and start this video again. It worked great the first time. Still no sound. He's unmuting us. Nope, no sound. Mm-mm. I could go get my computer. I've got mine and it's loaded on it. Mine's loaded on it. I'll go get it. We'll go forward and I'll go get it. We may have to switch computers. We've got a computer issue. Have you got a computer? We've got a backup computer coming. Let's just go on to the next and we'll... Okay. We're just going to go forward and yeah, I don't think it's going to play. We're going to go forward, and then in just a moment we'll switch our computers out and get a computer that actually is going to play the videos, because there's a couple that are really important. But here's what we know. We know that the brain, when we build a brain from very early on in life, we know that it's like building a house. So look at building this house. The strong foundation is just critical. And that's what the video really talks about, is that really important foundation that it takes to build a brain right from the beginning. So here's what we know about brain architecture. Again, we've got kind of an issue with the video. We're going to fix this. So we know that brains are built over time, starting very early in life, and you know that. And that simple skills come first, and then more complex skills come at a later time. We know that cognitive, social, and personal capabilities are intertwined throughout the life. And we also know that a strong foundation at the very early years improves the odds for positive brain development. And here's what we know too about ACEs. We've always known that these things affect how students act. But what we didn't know until the ACEs study came along is that not only does it affect the brain and it affects life, it affects health. That's the new piece, is the health piece. So here's what we know about the brain. And again, I'm not sure why the video's not showing the screen's kind of messed up. But here's what we know. We have neural connections in our brain that starts very early in life. And if you look, you can hardly see it. Way over in that corner, you see the newborn, and then you see 1 month, 9 months, 2 years, and adults. So we have these connections in our brain that are reinforced by just serve and return and by people talking to us. And if you look at this picture, you see at 2 years, look at the difference between 2 years and adult. Pretty amazing, huh? 2 years, we have more connections in our brain than we do as an adult. That's because our brain is an amazing piece of work that actually prunes things we don't use. So have you ever heard people say use it or lose it? That's what it's about. If you don't use those pieces of your brain, those connections will go away. And it works with our youth too. And if you look at the bottom part, the brain develops connections in the very early years of life. Now this one is really telltale, because if you look at birth and then you look at 6 years and 14 years, you see that the brain has, what's it done? It's gotten rid of some of those connections. Okay? So the connections are critical. Here's some scans of the brain, and if this is just fascinating, because if you look at the one on the left, that's a healthy brain. What do you see all over that? You see lots of color, don't you? Because all those colors are where that youth is being made, making connections in there, and people are talking to them, and they're forming connections. They're learning language. They're making all of those connections. And if you see over on the right side, this is a child's brain from Romania that lived in an orphanage. Now look at that part that is just in the temporal lobes, that is just, there's no brain activity there. That black part. And what that means is that there has been no connections made for that child. Nobody is talking to that child. They're just left in the crib alone, and nobody is interacting with them. So what we know about brain research is that not only does that piece not develop, it also shrinks the brain, and the brain becomes smaller. Okay? So critical to know this, because as we talk about it, we're going to talk about stress. And we know there are 3 types of stress. And when we talk about stress, the first one is positive stress. Positive stress would be like me standing up here and my technology not working. But Kim's going to fix it for me, so then it becomes positive stress. So I can get through that. You deal with positive stress all the time. Things in your life that happen, and you make it through it, and you get through it. And it's things like the first day of school, the first day you meet those parents, the first day that you work with these students. You probably feel a little bit stressful at that. Okay, so that's positive stress, and we get through it. The next one is what we call tolerable stress. And this is really an important piece, because the tolerable stress is what you face and you know how to deal with it. Like the death in your family, like a death, like a natural disaster. For a young person, the loss of a pet, things like that. That's what we call tolerable stress. So how do they get through that? Positive relationships. They have a positive, caring relationship with an adult that might be you. I said at the very beginning, and I really mean this, I know that a lot of our youth, you're the ones they talk to. They may not tell their teacher everything that's going on at home, but they talk to you because they feel comfortable with you. Bus drivers, you're the one that sees how upset they are when they get on that bus, so you know something's going on. Cafeteria workers, do we have cafeteria folks in here? You know what's going on with them as well. They come through the line, they're upset, so you know how to deal with that. Then the last piece of stress is what we call toxic stress. And kind of think about that for a minute, the word toxic stress. Toxic, not good. Toxic stress. That's when we face things like abuse and neglect, and we can't get through it. So are you going to switch me out? She's going to switch us out. So bear with us for one moment. Can we try the flash drive here? Okay, she doesn't have a HDMI connection apparently. We might have audio now, so we're going to see. Kim, if you'll stay up here and we'll try to get the... All right, we'll try to get this to work. So hopefully this one is going to work, and maybe not. Kim? Trust me, this has not happened, and I think it's the computer actually, but we cannot get it to come up. They all should work. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the computer. So you've got this connection. I do have that connection. All right, we're going to switch computers real quick. So, while we're switching computers, I want you to just talk to your neighbor. I call him your elbow partner. Talk to your elbow partner about what kind of stresses do you think our students face every day? What kind of toxic stress? Think about that. Yeah, I know, it's what I told her. We need... getting there, Kim.
Recovery.
So enable content. Take it over here and enable the content. And go slideshow from beginning. We'll go back to the beginning and okay. Where'd the thing go? Oh, you're gonna have to do the we may have business here. It worked. So we're going to go backwards just a little bit, and we're going to show you the brain architecture video because I think it's really a good one to kind of get us started. And in this video, I want you to think about what I just told you about how the brain is like building a house.
Science tells us that the experiences we have in the first years of our lives actually affect the physical architecture of the developing brain. This means that brains aren't just born, they're also built over time based on our experiences. Just as a house needs a sturdy foundation to support the walls and roof, a brain needs a good base to support all future development. Positive interactions between young children and their caregivers literally build the architecture of the developing brain. Building a sturdy foundation in the earliest years provides a good base for a lifetime of good mental function and better overall health. So just how is a solid brain foundation built and maintained in a developing child? One way is through what brain experts call serve and return interactions. Imagine a tennis match between a caregiver and a child, but instead of hitting a ball back and forth across a net, various forms of communication pass between the two. From eye contact to touch, from singing to simple games like peekaboo. These interactions, repeated throughout a young person's developing years, are the bricks that build a healthy foundation for all future development. But another kind of childhood experience shapes brain development too, and that's stress. Good kinds of stress, like meeting new people or studying for a test, are healthy for development because they prepare kids to cope with future challenges. Another kind of stress, called toxic stress, is bad for brain development. If a child is exposed to serious, ongoing hardships like abuse and neglect, and he has no other caregiver in his life to provide support, the basic structures of his developing brain may be damaged. Without a sturdy foundation to properly support future development, he is at risk for a lifetime of health problems, development issues, even addiction. It's possible to fix some of the damage of toxic stress later on, but it's easier, more effective, and less expensive to build solid brain architecture in the first place. One of the things that sturdy brain architecture supports is the development of basic emotional and social skills, an important group of skills which scientists call executive function and self-regulation can be thought of like air traffic control in the child's mental airspace. Think of a young child's brain as the control tower at a busy airport. All those planes landing and taking off and all of the support systems on the ground simultaneously demand the controller's attention to avoid a crash. It's the same with a young child learning to pay attention, plan ahead and remember, and follow lots of rules. Like all of us, kids have to react to things happening in the world around them, while also dealing with worries, temptations, and obligations on their minds. As these demands for attention pile up, air traffic control helps a child regulate the flow of information, prioritize tasks, and above all, find ways to manage stress and avoid mental collisions along the way. Having this ability is a necessity for positive and level mental health. Developing effective air traffic control, overcoming toxic stress, and building solid brain architecture are things kids can't do on their own. And since strong societies are made up of healthy, contributing individuals, it's up to us as a community to make sure all young people have the kinds of nurturing experiences they need for positive development. To build better futures, we need to build better brains.
again, we know that building a brain is like building a house, which we've already talked about, so I'm going to go forward. We talked about this. One thing I didn't tell you, and I think this is, again, fascinating, is that a child from the age of 1 to age 5 makes a quadrillion synapses in their brain. A quadrillion connections are made in their brain. So when we talk to kids, we're forming all of that basis for all of their language. So that serve and return is critical. So we talked about different kinds of stress, and like I said, tolerable stress is what we just went through because we got the connection fixed. So we deal with that all the time. And we know how to deal with that because we've learned coping skills. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about toxic stress. And this is, again, I think you will recognize some of this in some of the students you work with.
Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go on alert. There's an adrenaline rush, increased heart rate, and an increase in stress hormone levels. When the stress is relieved after a short time, or a young child receives support from caring adults, the stress response winds down and the body quickly returns to normal. In severe situations, such as ongoing abuse and neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. Even when there is no apparent physical harm, the extended absence of response from adults can activate the stress response system. Constant activation of the stress response overloads developing systems, with serious, lifelong consequences for the child. This is known as toxic stress. Over time, this results in a stress response system set permanently on high alert. In the areas of the brain dedicated to learning and reasoning, the neural connections that comprise brain architecture are weaker and fewer in number. Science shows that the prolonged activation of stress hormones in early childhood can actually reduce neural connections in these important areas of the brain at just the time when they should be growing new ones. Toxic stress can be avoided if we ensure that the environments in which children grow and develop are nurturing, stable, and engaging.
So again, the one thing you heard this morning, and I don't know if Mr. McDaniel, did he have a chance to talk to you guys? One of the things that I keep hearing repeated over and over in Lawrence County is talking about the relationships. How important it is for relationships, for students to have somebody that they can go to and talk to and have those relationships with. And that's what we know about toxic stress. We can buffer some of those negative effects with that strong relationship piece. So I'm going to let Pat talk a little bit about serve and return.
Guys, serve and returners is just so important. How many of you, what's your first reaction when you see a cute little baby? Aww, and what do you want to do with it? Hold it, kiss on it. Yeah, I always tell the story. I'm going to start a business when I retire, and it's going to be called Rent-A-Baby. And it's going to be for those people whose children will not get married and have kids for them. And so you can get your dopamine levels every day increased by holding a little baby and kissing and loving on, but giving it back. So it'd be like being a grandparent. You can love on it and give it back. But that serve and return is so important because it buffers all that toxic stress that Janet just talked about. Serve and return is the basis for our literacy skills. So when you have your Read to Be Ready program this summer, one of the things we always talk about in school is when should you start reading to your baby, to your child? As soon as they can sit and listen to a story. So that serve and return is the foundation for our literacy skills, and it's also the foundation for something called our social and emotional skills. Those skills that teach us how to regulate our emotions how to express our emotions, how to play nice and get along with others. Everything you ever needed to know, you learned it in kindergarten, and that's true. So serve and return is extremely important. So I want you to watch this little video because, well, I'm going to let you watch it, then you tell me.
In this still fakes experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points.
Yeah.
The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions. They turn away. They feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
Okay, how'd you feel when you watched that? Did it tug at your heartstrings? You can't, I mean, that's hard to watch when your baby's reaching out for you not to respond. Sometimes we see kids who will do anything to get attention because they're not getting that serve and return at home. They will act out, acting out behaviors, anything, any attention to them is better than no attention at all. And we noticed that when the mother wouldn't respond, the baby started crying and turning away. So serve and return is extremely important. When you go out in public, and we were just at a meeting in D.C., and when I was out there, we went to the zoo, and I looked at how parents interacted with their children. Now, when they were babies, they were more interactive. So when they got more like this, they were kind of yanking them along a little bit to keep up. But that serve and return is so important for the development of buffers for that toxic stress, for the development of positive coping skills. So let's talk a little, we're getting to the meat of it now. So adverse childhood experiences, things that happen to you. How many of you have ever had anything, a life event happen to you? You've had a death of a family member or something happen that was traumatic in your life, okay? But adverse childhood experiences are a little differently, and I'm going to show you what those are. But I love this study they did back in 1990, and I highlighted in red why I liked it so much. Because this was a huge aha moment for me and made me feel so much better about myself. And that is, this report that studied people with ACEs was not on low socioeconomic persons of color or students with disabilities. It was on white, middle class, educated, insured folks, which was such a relief to me. So everything I went through when I was growing up, I wasn't the only one that had it happen. Lots of people have things happen to them. And you don't have to come from a certain socioeconomic background for it to happen to you, or a certain ethnicity. What they found was that the participants, 2/3 of them reported at least one ACE, and of those that reported one ACE, 87% reported having at least one. So what are the ACEs? This is what they include: child abuse, sexual abuse, the physical, emotional abuse, emotional neglect, physical neglect, family dysfunction such as mental health problems, mental illness, depression, suicide, drug addiction, alcoholism, domestic violence, parental discord, divorce, separation, abandonment, incarceration. There's a 10-question quiz. If you Googled online ACEs, ACE, you'll see this questionnaire. And I would encourage you to take that just for yourself. We don't give this to kids because kids don't need to take this. But it helps me as an adult to understand where I'm coming from. And what we do know, though, is those questions that deal with those issues, what we do know is that kids who have a score of 4 or more are 7 times more likely to become an alcoholic or a drug addict, are 6 times more likely to have sex by age 15, 2 times more likely to be diagnosed with cancer, 4 times more likely to be a smoker. And if you have a score of 6 or more, you're 30 times more likely to attempt suicide. And you have a 20-year shortened lifespan. We know that ACEs, that toxic stress, adversely affects our physical well-being and our mental well-being if it's left unaddressed. But here's the good news, and there is good news. This can be daunting. ACEs does not equal trauma. It does not have to be the way it was before. Because I think Mr. McDaniel had this in his presentation, the quote, life is about 10% what happens to you and 90% of what you do about it. So it's not about the event itself, it's what you do with that event. So when I was growing up, I had 5 of those 10 ACEs. So why am I successful? Why did I do okay? And when I think back about that, I did have that one caring adult that cared about me, that really listened to what I had to say. So that is a significant piece to the buffer these ACEs for kids. And access and kids can heal, adults can heal from that. And it's all about that resiliency. Because this is the great news. Our brains can reorganize synaptic connections. We can grow and repair our brain. If you have a child that has not been serve and return growing up, they get that from school. They get that from other places in the community. So we can recover from this. That's why it does take a whole village to raise our children. So Janet's going to tell us, how many of you knew you had all that in your brain?
So back to what Pat said about the connections that you make with kids. When I was a counselor, I had a student ask me one time, he said, Miss Watkins, what is better for you, home or school? And I thought about that for a minute, and I said, of course, home. That's where I feel loved, I feel cared for, I have my needs met. And so I looked at this young man and I said, so what is the best place for you? And he said, school. That told me a lot. That told me that he wasn't having those needs met at home. And you deal with these children all the time that feel that way. School can be the best place for them. When school starts, when does it start? Next week? Friday. When school starts Friday, you're going to have some excited kids getting on that bus, some excited kids coming into school because it is their safe place. So let's talk about the brain for a minute. Because here's what we've learned about the brain. This part of our brain that we think of as our brain is what we call the neocortex. And this is the part of our brain that we learn things. We learn language, we learn math, we learn reasoning, all of those learning pieces in that blue part of our brain. We've always known that. The middle part, the green part, is called the limbic system. And that is the really fascinating piece of the brain. And there's a piece in there called the amygdala that I'll show you in a minute. And that's the part of our brain that deals with all the emotions that we have, everything that we feel, okay? And then the last is the brain stem, and that's what we call the reptilian brain. And you'll see it up there. It's the brown part, and it goes down your spine, starts here on your neck and goes down your spine. We call it the reptilian brain because it's what the animals have, because it's what makes your body function. Helps you to breathe and walk and all of those things. So here's what we know about the brain. For adults, when we process something, when something happens to us, we go from the top down, okay? So look at the top is your neocortex. So something happens, and as an adult, you've learned, you're thinking about it. You're thinking about that. Like, for example, if you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off in the road. So you're thinking, oh my goodness, I have to straighten up, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. I was really close to a wreck. The thinking part of your brain is working. Then you get to the emotion part, and then you start feeling that, why did they do that? What were they thinking? You might even say a few choice words, right? That happens. So that's the limbic system. That's the part of your brain that has this amazing piece called the amygdala. And the amygdala is right in the middle. It's that piece that looks like a circle. That's like a fire alarm in your brain. And for some kids, that is huge. And that part of their brain is firing all the time. Because what we know about ACEs is, like I said, we think from the top down, but a child with high ACEs and that has faced toxic stress, they don't think that way. They think from the bottom up. So what happens is they start thinking with their feeling part, like, I'm angry, I'm upset, what's happening to me? Because they can't get to this prefrontal cortex, and they can't think about, they can't process it like you can. So just kind of keep that in your mind. Like adults, we go from the top down, but for young people that are facing toxic stress, they go from the bottom up. And that's really important in how we respond to kids. So I went to in Washington State a couple of years ago to a trauma-informed school. And this was a guy called Jim Sporleader who led this some of this research. And what he said was he had what they called the fail school. In his district, they called his school the fail school. He had like a 20% graduation rate. And so he said, we've got to change the way we're talking to our children. So we've got to look at it in a different way. And so he found out about this brain research. And so he taught the kids this picture. And he taught them that when you're in that red zone from the bottom up, what we know is that you cannot process and talk. So how many of you have ever heard the saying, I'm so mad I can't see straight? Yeah, same idea. How many of you have ever been so angry or so upset that you cannot talk about something right then and there? Same thing with our youth. When they are in that red zone, when they're going from the bottom up, they can't process. And what Mr. Sporleader found is that those students When he gave them some time to get out of that red part of their brain, then they could talk and they could say, this is what's going on. This is why I was upset. So again, important piece to know when we're talking about toxic stress. I think I'm going to skip this because we're going to be short on time. So I want to go look at this for a minute. This is another piece that we know when we talk about students. Let's say that you have two students that come into your school, Billy and Eddie. Billy, look at his adverse childhood experiences. He's faced a lot. He's had probably 7 or 8 out of 10 of those adverse childhood experiences occur to him. So his window of stress is this much. He's that one that comes in the classroom or gets on the bus or goes to the cafeteria, and one thing sets him off. Literally, we'll go, it was minor. Why did he react that way? It was so tiny. One thing, because look at his tolerance for stress. It's that big. But then Eddie, they look the same, they're in the same class. Eddie comes to school and he's had that caring adult. He's had that person that talks to him. His life is pretty good. So lots of things can happen to him throughout the day. And he doesn't really lose control because his window for his tolerance for stress is huge, huge. So we know that toxic stress and adverse childhood experiences, it truly affects that stress level. So look at this picture and think about it. What do you think these children face every day? What kind of problems do they face every day? You see it. You know it. Is it somebody different at the house when they get home? Or maybe nobody at the house when they get home? What are they facing? So turn to what I call your elbow partner, the person next to you. What do you think your students face daily? What kind of adverse experiences do you think they face? Just talk to your neighbor for a second. So a little bit later, we're going to talk about what a difference you can make in that experience. I'm going to let Pat talk a little bit about what lies beneath the behavior. Because here's what we know about young people. If they have high ACEs and they have that small window of, remember that small tolerance of stress level, one of these things is going to happen when something happens to them.
Okay, how many of you are a parent? How many of you have children? How many of you went to school about 2 years to learn how to be a parent? Did you? So how many of you, when you had your baby, women, the instruction manual came out with the baby? Did that happen? No. Parenting is the hardest job on this earth outside of working in education. It's very difficult. We don't get many instructions. It's supposed to come naturally, right? Well, that's not right. When I used to teach parenting classes in my district, we talked about something that was another aha moment for me. And it was called the think, feel, do cycle. And some of you may have heard of that before. Did you know your thoughts cause your feelings, cause your actions? I'll give you for example. What if a student came onto your bus, using the bus drivers, or into the office, and you said to that student, well, good morning, little Stevie, and excuse my language, but I'm not going to say it, but he said, oh, Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so, F off. Does that ever happen? I'm sure you've never heard that word in any of your surroundings. I hope not. But if you do, as an educator or working in education, what is the first thing you think of? What's your thoughts? What's your feelings? Your thought is, I'm the adult, I'm in charge, you are not to talk to me that way. I mean, that's really a Southern thing too. You don't treat me that way. So how do I feel? Angry, upset, annoyed. I may say, go to the office, whatever. The same thing is with parents. When your authority is being questioned, as in, would you pick that up? No. Would you do that? No. You will, because I'm the parent. So we have our own think, feel, do cycle, and so do our kids. But kids who have been affected by ACEs or trauma do one of those three things. They either fight, flight, or freeze. So when you look at that list up there, have you ever seen any of these behaviors in your school or on your bus? Acting out? No, that never happens. Silliness, hyperactivity. These are the behaviors that these children exhibit. And how do we handle that? Because these are their thoughts. Their thoughts are telling them, like Janet said, their amygdala's all fired up. So that's their thought, and it's making them feel a certain way, and this is what you're seeing is their behavior. But what happens when you add your think, feel, do cycle to that? So we need to be understanding of not all behavior, but a lot of behavior, there's something beneath that. We know that there's a feeling beneath all of that behavior. So all we're asking as we go around the state is to start the year off anew, a fresh perspective, to take your glasses off, and the pair you put back on will be more of a trauma-informed lens. So instead of saying to kids, what's the matter with you? What's wrong with you? Why don't you just do that? How many times have I said that as a parent? And what do they say? Oh. Right? So the next time you see any of those behaviors, instead of saying, what's wrong with you? Get over here. Stop acting like that. What happened to you? How can I help? Just look at them through that trauma lens. Is if you do one thing this year, to understand behind every behavior there's a thought and a feeling, and instead of our typical reactions is to try a new one, because that way we cultivate resilience. Everyone is resilient. You are, I am, everyone. Things have happened to me in my life, but I've bounced back because I've had good coping skills. I've been able to deal with those. Years ago, I started out in education teaching life skills. That's what I was, like a teen living teacher. But I taught life skills. I don't think they even have teen living anymore. But that taught life skills, teach kids how to cope and how to make good decisions and how to regulate their emotions. And that's what we've got to go back to. This is what I think a school is. A school is a charging station for kids. When you see a graphic of a school building, I envision all these plugs, electrical plugs going into it. Kids come to school to get charged. They get fed, they get clothed, they get taken care of, their minds grow. They're charging stations for us. And we build resiliency in students every day through our relationships. And those are so vital and important to the growth and development of all our kids. Because what we want to do, and you can barely see this, is when things happen in a school setting, to realize the other thing is, it's not about me. It's not about me. To drop that personal mirror and say, this is not about me. Something else is going on with that kid right now. It's not about me at all. And to always look at what's really behind that behavior for that kid. And if you don't know, reach out to the school. Ask the principal, ask the teacher, and get to the bottom of that. Sometimes we're so busy in education. We're great logistical people, moving kids from here to there and going through our routines and our schedules during the day, and everything is down to the minute, that we don't have time to look at what is beneath that behavior. We're too busy. And what we know now is, in our society today, we have got to ask those crucial questions of students, and that's what's happening to you. Because Janet was talking about the road rage, what we see now. People get guns out and shoot each other and kill each other, and they don't know what to do with those feelings inside. So trauma-informed schools are those schools who ask kids that question. Go from what's wrong with you, why in the world did you do that, to what happened to you. So Janet, I know this picture does not look familiar.
Hopefully it's not familiar. So in a trauma-informed school and trauma-informed lens, we go from reacting like this to responding. So reacting is telling kids, this is how you should feel. I'm reacting to this. Responding is really listening. So look at that picture for a minute. That's a reaction. Here's some of the traditional reactions that we see. So look at those, and I'm not going to read them to you. I'm going to let you read those. But how many of you have ever said that? I have. I've said some of those. That's reacting. So instead of reacting, we need to be responding. This is responding. And I know people sometimes say, oh, you're not supposed to hug kids anymore. Some of them need that, don't they? They need to know that you care about them. They need that. And this is trauma-informed responses. I'm going to let you read that. Look at the difference. If I said to a young person, sometimes life just gets too hard, doesn't it? That opens the gate for them to talk. That shows them that you are that positive, caring relationship. So when I went to Washington, what Jim Sporleader told me is, in our school, if you can remember anything else, we went from reacting and telling kids, this is how you should feel, to responding and asking and listening. So this is what they did. So I want to end, there's a video we want to show you, and this video is really powerful because, again, it's about relationships. And it's called Every Opportunity, because every opportunity throughout their day, we all have that power to influence students.
Yeah. And before we end today with this video, which is awesome, I just want to encourage all of you to take care of yourselves. It's all about self-care. You cannot give, I can't give to my husband, to my job, something I don't feel or have at the time. Are you going to get burned out and upset and you just had it this year? Yeah, that's going to happen. So take time for yourself, exercise, meditate, walk, talk, eat, whatever it is that makes you happy. Give yourself permission to do that every day. Take care of yourself. You're the only you there is. And your job is not easy. It's not easy working with kids. You know, some days it's easier than others, and some days it's a joy and a blessing, and that's great, but some days they're bad. and we want to make sure that we take care of ourselves. So remember that. One of the things we told the teachers over there, well, there's a new program out. It's called the Happy Teacher Revolution, and they have happy hour once a week. So not what you think, not the drinking happy hour. But I don't know, they may do that too, I don't know. But it's they support each other and meet once a week, not as a gripe session, not there to complain about the job or the boss or whoever, but to support each other and do just like Janet was talking before in that responding. I know how hard this is. So let's give an opportunity to talk about that. So if you don't have anything like that in your life right now, I encourage you to find that.
Hey, Mr. Kim! Did you see that? Why would somebody do that?
Please go into the classroom, no talking, quietly.
Hey, Miss Meredith, how you doing?
We need you inside.
How do you think that makes us feel? I forgot my number.
What's your name?
Jordan?
What's your last name?
Carter?
Go ahead.
School is hard enough.
Come on in, sit down quietly at your desks, and begin writing.
This kind of stuff just makes it harder.
I said quietly, please. Who's talking? Is it you, Sophie? Don't let it be you.
Don't believe me?
Sophie.
Please just watch.
I'm not up here for me, I'm up here for you. Pay attention. Okay? Now somebody answer me. Somebody needs to answer me really fast.
Every time we're ignored or yelled at or silenced, the teacher takes away what's possible.
No horseplay, no running, and especially no talking.
Moment by moment.
Miss Garrity.
Your student's behavior yesterday in the lunchroom, it was terrible. Next time, silent lunch.
Did you hear that? Stay in line and catch a ball. I'm not playing.
If this is education, we're in trouble. Bye, Miss McGarrity. Frederick Douglass said, once you learn to read, you'll be forever free. The way it is now, 2 of the 3 of us will never be able to really read. It doesn't have to be this way.
Hey, Jordan, how you doing? Good.
Everyone we meet throughout our day can make a difference.
I've been waiting for you to arrive.
All the difference.
Good morning, Jordan.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How are you?
Good.
Go ahead and put your number in.
Talk with us, not at us.
That's okay. I'll look it up for you. Go ahead, sweetheart.
Okay.
All right.
Teach us what we need to know. That's how we get smarter.
Well, good morning, Sophie, Janicia, and Jordan.
And when you talk with us and teach us, give us bigger and bigger words.
Now what I'd like you to do, children, is turn around and converse with your neighbor and discuss where the mother might have gone.
Words that we can use to read and understand.
She's prayed for evil, so she comes at night.
And that will take us places we could never reach without it.
Remember, we're entering the learning zone. Now, how can we show our respect to the children and teachers who are working?
We can walk quietly.
Yes. Okay, kids, so what I'd like you to do is continue writing your narrative, documenting your emotions if you were the baby owl and your mother abandoned you in the nest.
What can you do? Learn all that you can so that you can challenge us to be our best.
You would have stayed and assisted them in whatever they needed.
Share yourself with us and show us how to share ourselves with others. Give us courage. Give us compassion. Help us find our own voices so we can become who we are meant to be.
Why would you want to silence us?
Again, you have an amazing opportunity to influence lives. Just by talking to students, just by learning their name and actually calling them by name, it's that whole relationship piece. We appreciate your patience today, especially with our technology issues. We certainly appreciate your patience.
Oh, good. Thank you. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to sing to you. I've always dreamed of doing that on the stage. So never forget, you are important. You make a difference. Not one day, but every day of the year. So please go out and have a great year. Do you need to say something? Okay. Don't leave yet. I think something about food. There may be food involved. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Okay, we are fixing to have lunch. Everyone eats in the gym. When you go out of the auditorium and to your right, you will go downstairs. After lunch, there are some groups meeting with your supervisors, and they've given me a list of where that is. Food service will be in the fellowship hall downstairs. Bus drivers will be in room 301 in the northeast corner. If you do not know where that is, once we get to lunch and everyone's eaten, we'll kind of help guide you in the right direction. Have a great rest of the day. Enjoy your lunch, and let's have a great school year.